Hi, it's Angie, and this is Midlife Magic and Mayhem. This episode speaks directly to creating magic and mayhem, and it is about one of my very favorite topics, pleasure. And I'm speaking with Elizabeth Wood, who literally wrote a book called The Pleasure Prescription, A Surprising Approach to Healing Sexual Pain, with her business partner, Dee Hartmann. Elizabeth is a co-founder of the Pleasure Movement, an organization dedicated to helping women find pleasure in their bodies, some for the very first time. As a certified erotic blueprint coach, tantra educator, and somatic sex educator, she has immense knowledge of the healing power of pleasure. She has been working in sexual health and wellness for over 2 decades with individuals, couples, and groups. She has led comprehensive sex workshops and lectures at multiple universities, including Metropolitan State University of Denver and Naropa University. Elizabeth earned a master's degree in clinical social work from Loyola University, Chicago, and is a former licensed private practice sex therapist. We do a deep dive into the importance of pleasure in all areas of life and why we both believe in its healing and transformational power. Other highlights of this conversation are how pleasure can be a critical tool in healing pain, specifically sexual pain, the importance of knowing our own anatomy and that everyone's anatomy is normal, the role of pleasure in nervous system downregulation, the role of pleasure in embodiment and cultivating wisdom as we journey towards elderhood, and a simple yet profound prescription from the book that all women can use to begin connecting to themselves, their bodies, and their pleasure. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hi, Angie.
It is so nice to have you here. Thank you and welcome for being on Midlife Magic and Mayhem. It is an honor and a pleasure to have your presence here with us.
Well, quite honestly, who wouldn't find it pleasurable to be on a podcast with such a creative title? So let's create some magic and mayhem.
I love it. I love it. Well, first, I would love to have you speak to your career path, because you're one of those people that has such an interesting journey of twists and turns and how you got to be where you are. So if you will give us a sense of the career path that you've had up to this point, and then writing your book, The Pleasure Prescription.
Absolutely. So that was a very long road. I started out with a real fascination with regard to psychology and psyche and how people think and why they behave the way they do. So long ago, many decades, I graduated with a degree, an undergraduate degree in psychology. And then I decided to go and make what I did with my family and friends, like listening to people and talking them through whatever issues or problem solving with them. I decided to get my master's in clinical social work. As a clinical social worker, I was offered an adjunct semester of study at this fascinating place called the Loyola University Sexual Dysfunction Clinic. And I jumped at the chance to study with a team approach. So at the clinic, we learned to talk about sex and sexuality in our practices. And at that time, I was a licensed social worker, but we were there side by side with medical students who were also learning how to talk about sex and pleasure and arousal and desire in their private practices. And so from then on, that moment forward, I was always a fan of the holistic approach to sex and sexuality. Well, I then became specialized in sex therapy as a sex therapist, and I did that for 11 years in private practice in Chicago until the medical model didn't work for me anymore. The medical model back in the day classified somebody's issues or problems around sexuality in one of 4 or 5 categories, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's called the DSM. So at that point when I was working, I think we were on the DSM-4, and then they've since expanded it to the DSM-5. Regardless, there are 4 or 5 labels that you would then apply to a client. And that was based on some type of dysfunction. That didn't work for me because I was working with couples, working with individuals who simply did not know the ABCs of sex. And I couldn't label someone as dysfunctional just because they really didn't know what went where or how to engage in any type of sexual act when they had no education, or even worse, miseducation about how their bodies appropriately functioned and in a healthy manner functioned. So I walked away from my license and started studying alternative methods of and modalities of sexual awareness, sexual awakening, and sexual healing that I never learned from an academic textbook. And I couldn't get enough information. All of the learning, non-traditional learning, non-academic learning, while steeped in deep tradition and centuries of text, was something that fascinated me. And I said, I'm done. I'm no longer going to use the medical model. But I learned all of these different things about, in my opinion, a better way for me to work with my clients. So I did that for quite a long period of time. And then I reconnected with my co-author on our book, Dee Hartmann, who I met when I was still a licensed therapist. Dee and I worked in a multidisciplinary clinic. We met, we fell in love with each other in regard to her approach to addressing pain. And she always connected with how I looked at pain or looked at life from a pleasure perspective. So more than a decade after working together, she and I got together to write this fabulous book. So what I like so much about this book is actually our secondary title, The Pleasure Prescription, A Surprising Approach to Healing Sexual Pain. Because what we found is nobody ever really talked about pleasure with regard to working with diminishing a person's experience of pain. And we've actually found that this has reached clients and people, they're not clients necessarily, clients and people all over the world who are suffering from unwanted pain at intercourse, on the vulva, internally inside the vagina. And it's a hidden epidemic because we don't talk about sex. We don't talk about the body parts below our navels. So we've had great success reaching people who really the book was written for. We've reached people all over the world. India, Estonia, Israel, and of course here in the United States, because there's never been this type of methodology with regard to working and diminishing pain.
It is such a fascinating topic, and I personally have such a good relationship now with pleasure, and it wasn't something that I had ever really put much thought into until the past few years. But I do have a couple of questions about your history and your trajectory. When you first got that the opportunity to work in the sexuality domain and get the training to be a sex therapist, when you were transitioning from psychology into that and got the program at Loyola, did that just happenstance be that concentration, or did you actively seek that out?
So as we were graduating from the master's program, it was suggested that we could participate in this semester free of charge, as we had just finished the program, free of charge and working around sex and sexuality. And I thought, this is actually going to change how I talk at the Thanksgiving dinner table. My conservative English father might swallow his teeth if I started to talk about these type of subjects. And I thought, this has to be something really fun. So I actually jumped at it because I thought, wow, I don't think I'm ever going to be on that B-list invitation grouping anymore. I'm going to make it straight to the A-list with regard to parties, social events, and certainly give my dad a little bit of a run for his English money. So I just wanted to sort of see if I could startle or rattle or shake him. And that actually truly was part of my motivation in enrolling in the program. It was free. And at that point I was in my 20s, and I thought, what a great way to learn about sex and learn about it with medical students at the same time. What did they know that I didn't know? What did I know that they didn't know? And the focus of being interdisciplinary was something that has always, always excited me.
Yeah. So I have found in my own life and working with clients in my practice as well, and just living in the world, such a lack of education when it comes to sex and what it is and what it isn't. And there's just this big gaping hole. So I'm so grateful for people like you doing this work. And I think it's so, so, so very important. And I am also curious about this transition from leaving the medical model of therapy and some of the other research. So when you left that and then started delving into all of these other trainings or learnings or non-traditional environments, what did that look like? Where did you go? What did it look like? What were you learning?
Yeah. So first of all, let me absolutely confirm that what you said is true. Medical doctors in their intensive learning program during medical school, they have less than 10 hours. And I'm not talking about 10 semester hours like they were in college, but 10 actual 60-minute hours focused on sex and sexuality. So your medical doctor really has not been, no fault of theirs. They haven't been taught and they haven't been trained. And then you go to think about whether or not they harbor any type of shame or they harbor any type of discomfort around their own sex and sexuality. Of course, that's going to translate to discomfort in their offices talking to a client who may bring them some type of issue that they're not familiar with or they're not comfortable with. So I'm going to give the docs a break on that because it's just simply due to a lack of training, which of course the medical schools and the medical boards don't deem as relevantly important, which is a big, big negative with regard to how medical students are trained. And then with regard to my additional training, what was going on in that day and age where I left the medical model was Sting, who was at that point a member of the rock band, The Police. Sting was talking about his 8-hour orgasm. And I thought, first of all, that's got to be painful. And what the heck is he doing? And what about his wife, Trudy? What is she experiencing during that 8 hours? And he was talking about the 8-hour experience that he had as he was practicing tantra. So that's what was out there in that day and age. It was the easiest thing because it had sort of exploded on this new thing called the internet. So I found a tantra training, and from there, that led me in an indirect manner to the other trainings and other certifications that I've acquired. The first one was I'm a certified tantra educator. Then that led me to somatic sex education and body work. So I'm now a certified somatic sex educator. And then from there, I started to hear about this fabulous teaching by one of my dear friends and mentors, Jaya, who created the Erotic Blueprints. And so I thought, well, it's against my better judgment. I cannot imagine having another certification after my initials, but it's one of the most solid and comprehensive methodologies that I've experienced within the last 5 years. So I'm also an erotic blueprint coach. So it's really a weaving of the different traditions or methodologies that make my practice as well-rounded as it is. And believe you me, I still refer to sex therapists because I am not a sex therapist. I am a comprehensive, sex positive, pleasure forward educator. And that's really how I title myself in this day and age.
So let's talk about pleasure. Why is it important? What does it do for us? And then we can we'll get to how it also relates to pain. But first, I would just love to know why pleasure is so important.
So we're born, if we have a healthy delivery, if we've had, a healthy gestation, we're born being absolutely vibrant, sensual beings. We can't quite see that the sense of sight develops later so that we can see images clearly. But without smell and without taste, babies do not thrive. So it's as if we're breastfed, we turn toward the smell of the milk of the mother's nipple, and it's our nose that leads us there. And without being able to taste and swallow and ingest, we really don't we're bottle fed, but back in the day we would not thrive. We would have had to have had some type of intervention, which fabulously and conveniently the bottle is. But we come alive through our senses from the moment we are born. And then for some reason that gets shut down. That could be parenting, that could be shaming, that could be religious. There are a whole host of factors that close off our ability to freely play in the realm of pleasure, which is sight, taste, sound, smell, and the last one, touch. So as babies, we're all, in a healthy environment, we're touched, we're coddled, we're stroked, we're soothed through our sense of touch. We're rocked, which is also touch, not only externally as we're held, but internally as everything slides and shifts as we're being rocked. So our five senses really are the base of what it means to experience pleasure. And every single one of those has almost nothing to do with the experience of sex. It's all sensual pleasure. And then as we become age appropriate, we can start to commingle that into a sense of sexual pleasure. So we start out really innocent and really adventurous around all forms of sensation or sensual play. And so what I'm doing is I'm asking us all, inviting us all to bring that back into the forefront of our lives so that we can openly seek out pleasurable sights, openly lean toward pleasurable sounds, and up the ante with regard to our experience and sensation of pleasure. Want to join me?
Yes, absolutely. Well, these are some of the things that I talk about too when I speak to people about embodiment and how, people will ask me, well, what does that mean? How would I do that? And one of the first things that we talk about is go back to the five senses, just like you're speaking about. Go back to the five senses, create something beautiful in your visual field, your auditory field, something to listen to, smell, taste. And I believe, isn't that also why babies, when they're learning about something, when they can start to grab and hold things, they put everything in their mouth because that's how they get information. everything goes in the mouth because that's how they gather information.
And that is how they thrive, by sucking on something, mother's breast, nipple from a bottle. That's how they were nourished. And it's also something that has to do with down-regulating the central nervous system. So it's a calming and soothing mechanism when we embody. That means paying attention and feeling inside our body, or experiencing inside our body, whatever one of the senses is that we're exploring. It's paying attention to and now tuning in, so that it's not just background noise. But it's a down-regulating sensation when you listen to classical music.
Explain about the correlation between down-regulating the nervous system, relaxation, and pleasure.
So there are entire fields dedicated to this. But when our central nervous system is down-regulated, we are not spiked up in a, suddenly somebody crosses in front of me as I'm driving and I go into a spike of cortisol. I'm out of what's called my window of tolerance. And then if I'm below that window of tolerance, because if I've had too much alcohol, I've had, I've smoked a joint, whatever it might be, my central nervous system is so downregulated that I'm almost drowsy and fatigued. So when we're spiked up higher, what tends to happen is we're looking for, our body wants to come back down within that zone of tolerance, that window of tolerance. And we do that by calming in any one of the five senses. Like if we listen to a melody that isn't grunge, rock and roll, screaming, with obscenities. If we listen to something that's more, it has more of a rhythm and it's more of a melody, our central nervous system starts to unwind and release whatever that original spike was. We can do it with touch, very calmingly touch our bodies in see how slow and deliberate I am? There are special touch sensors right below the first couple layers of our skin that only respond to this type of touch. And over time, I can soothe myself and bring my spike back down within the window of tolerance.
So for people that are just listening, she has her forearm up and she has the other hand just slowly running down the forearm and then back up the forearm. Just something as simple as that.
And it's not my fingers. It's the whole length of my fingers and a full contour of my hand on my arm. So these sensors right underneath the skin, they only light up, they only come on board with a specific stroke and speed. It's actually more speed. With more of the speed, really slow, and for our listeners, slow, slow, slower. And what can you perceive when we slow down? And then can you perceive something at half of that speed? And that begins to bring the central nervous system down. Your spike of cortisol will start to lower. It's actually one of the reasons why we like to stroke our pets and pet our pets as often as we do. Not only does it downregulate them into a sleepy space, but it also helps us co-regulate to a much slower speed. So those households that have pets, a furry, fluffy, a Fido, whatever it is, that's a petable pet, not a goldfish, that really is a very innate way of calming down the central nervous system. Also by me just simply adjusting the speed at which I engage with you, Angie, in our discussion. I can certainly rev it up. I can soften my voice. I can lower the speed so that your brain through your ear is learning that down regulation, there's safety. We crave safety, and we crave that really perfect vibration, not too high, not too low, with regard to how we're revving our own energy. And that is the place where pleasure and play truly can be experienced. When we're not like so relaxed that we're comatose, but when we feel calm, the more calm we feel, the more safer we experience our environment. We feel safe within our own bodies, and that allows us to explore more difference, more diversions, more zones of pleasurable sensation.
How important is play with all of this as well? You've mentioned play a couple of different times now, and that's another thing that I think we can lose over time. Not everyone, but some people, some of the time, some women, some of the time can lose that sense of play. And especially when we're entering these stages of midlife, some people find that the play goes away completely. And then some people get very rejuvenated around this idea of play. So that's another topic that I'm fascinated about. Like, where does play come in with this pleasure domain as well?
Yeah. And it also really defines, like you and I, Angie, are going to define play differently. So what tends to happen as we, we're moving through the normal life, or the traditional, I shouldn't say those words either, but when we're moving from life's phase to life phase, it ends up that we sort of become more contracted and more restricted about our use of time. And a lot of people, a lot of adults, no matter, age range, or to stick to the non-binary, no matter what type of body they're in or how they identify, we tend to think of play as frivolous, something that is, oh, that's so selfish. It's so childlike. Well, no, I want to reclaim play as something that brightens our day. It could be literally playing a game or going outside in the rain and, just absolutely being fascinated by the puddles and the drops of water coming on your shoulders and dripping through your hair. That's a form of play. Some people might think of taking a vacation or leaving their house and going on a nature walk. That can be very, very playful if we attune to it differently than simple exercise and getting our cardio in for the day or amping up our heart rate. We can find play in almost every domain. If you're going to engage in some type of play with someone else, get their consent. Do you want to do this experiment with me? Let's go out and play. Well, what does that mean? What does it look like? I mean, it could be coloring in a coloring book. It could be, we do this so often as parents of younger children. We go back in that domain of playing because that's the easiest way for our children to engage with us. That's super fun as adults. And so see what would make sense with regard to how you play. And it's not a silly thing. It is absolutely an essential piece to thriving in this otherwise overscheduled, overmanaged, and overcontrolled world, which is, kind of a little crazy these days. I mean, I'm not going to get into politics, but we're in an absolute period of time unlike previous generations because there's so much going on in the world that we forget how to relax, how to play, and simply play as how do we enjoy life.
So beautiful. Let's talk about the idea of looking at pleasure as an antidote for pain. And how did this idea first come to you? And I guess maybe come to you and Dee as you were writing the book, but how did you being with pleasure in this work? Or how did that first come up as a thing that could be possible?
So okay, let's just think we can look at it on a linear spectrum. So there is an indirect correlation between pleasure and pain. So think of in the day when I used to play on a teeter-totter. They had teeter-totters in my playground. So think when the more pain we feel, the less pleasure we experience. That's also a medical issue. If a person is in chronic pain, really high up here, it's very difficult for them to experience pleasurable things. So let's up the ante, increase the amount of pleasure we feel, and not just sexual pleasure, but what do you like to eat? What do you like to smell? What do you like to listen to? What fun activities do you like to do with your kids? And the more we put on this side of the teeter-totter, the more this quiets down and diminishes. So there is an indirect correlation between our pleasure capacity and the amount of pain we experience. You can also look at it on on a wheel or on a circle. So pain and pleasure are very, very close together on a circle. BDSM, bondage, dominance, and sadomasochism, the more pleasure a person feels in a BDSM session, the less pain they'll experience. What's going on there? They're the same receptors. I am not a brain scientist, but they're the same receptors up in our cortex, neocortex, whatever it is, that a person who is with their consent and whatever type of pain that they've been asking for. So if a person is being spanked, what ends up is it releases the dopamine. It releases all of the feel-good hormones so that we actually are experiencing this not teeter-totter, but this very thin, fine line between the experience of pain and pleasure. So that I like to look at on a circular perspective, but then also you can look at it from if you're a linear person, you can look at it from a linear perspective. So what we like to do is talk to people about upping their pleasure quotient. Like, how much pleasure do you feel during the day? When was the last time you actually went out and made notice of this? I live in Boulder, Colorado. So do you. Like, go outside and look at toward the mountains after a snow, if that's something that's pleasurable for you. But go outside and enjoy nature. We're so busy that we don't make time to notice all of the pleasurable things that surround us in everyday life.
I agree. There can be pleasure found in the simplest, slightest ways. You know, like you said, look towards the mountains after a snow, walk outside and take a deep breath, walk outside, put your feet on the ground when it's warm enough to do so. Or some of us like to be cold occasionally and put cold feet in the cold ground.
Exactly. Whatever tickles your fancy. So I've been to your house, your beautiful, lovely home. So any one of the paintings, such as the one over your shoulder, any one of those paintings somehow for you or your lovely partner, that made you feel good. Those colors are all throughout your house. So what about those colors was attractive to you? You didn't buy those pieces of art because they made you feel terrible. They didn't make you feel neutral. They put a smile on your face. You feel good when you're visually looking at them. And your house is just made that much brighter. Somebody might like black and white photography and the deep shadows and the dark contrasts between white and black. That's what's going to excite that person. So it's your pleasure quotient in terms of your visual turn-ons have certainly been filled by the artwork and the colors that you and your partner and your family have chosen to grace the walls of your house. I mean, it's a trick that realtors use. They would bake. They'd get the Toll House cookies in a tin or in a tube, and they would bake those because the smell of homemade cookies always makes, well, I shouldn't say always, makes some people feel so comforted. Or the smell of fresh bread. That's a trick that they used to use on the real estate market because it would turn more people on to enjoying the smell and look and sight of that particular home. So it makes sense. Are you going to go into a clean house and find it more attractive than a dirty house in terms of real estate sales? But just think we always feel more calm if the house is, or the home or the apartment, wherever we live, if it looks pleasant to us. Pleasant is the same as pleasing, is the same as pleasure in my book.
Mm-hmm. And environment does matter. Creating an environment, whatever that is for you, like you've stated, it's going to be different for everyone. But I do find that my environment for me matters, and what I have around me and what smells I'm smelling and how often do I take a break and do give myself a little quick hand massage and put on my favorite lotion because it's a little bit dry here in Colorado. And, just all these different things that I think we discount in our, like you said, busy lives that, well, that's silly. Who would have time to do any of those things? These are the tiny little things that make a difference when it comes to down-regulating the nervous system and when it comes to upping the pleasure quotient so that in any circumstance, it could be psychological pain, physical pain, it kind of rebalances that teeter-totter.
Yeah. And it's what happens is if we introduce something, like if you lit a candle, and I've seen candles all throughout the house, you chose them because they're scents that are pleasurable for you. Some of us like musky, woody, pine. Others love floral. Don't put a floral thing in front of me because if it's too, I don't even like the smell of jasmine tea. It smells like, the air freshener from my grandmother's bathroom. So what's really important here is that we also notice what gives us a neutral reaction, and most certainly what makes us, cringe or retreat from something. When we make a change in the environment and we notice, that's really the beginning of embodiment. So if we lit a citrus candle behind me, it's a smell that I like. I would notice the smell and I would bring it in to embody that sensation. So it's the noticing and not just walking around in sort of a ho-hum environment, making change so that we notice things, which is the key to embodying any one of our senses. Absent-mindedly, I might scratch my arm, just because I'm a little touch starved for the day. But then I notice, oh, wow, this feels really good. And now I'm embodying that particular sensation. And then versus doing it sort of rotely, automatically, I'm now consciously attuning to this lovely sensation. Again, I'm back to my arm for the listeners, rather than just flicking something off. Now I'm noticing how good that felt, and I'm just going to repeat it as long as I so choose. So it's about the noticing and taking in, which goes back to what we said earlier, is we actually have to invite the pleasure into our lives so that we can actually begin to thrive in all of these environments. It just, overall, it brightens our day. It puts the kick back in our step, all because it's involved in down-regulating the central nervous system.
Something else that just came up for me when you were speaking was this idea of presence. So if I'm in the practice of noticing what's pleasurable and embodying that, then that's going to put me squarely present to myself, to my body, what's happening in that moment. And it would seem to be that the more presence that I have, and please correct me if I'm off here, but it seems that the more presence I'm able to hold in that embodiment, then the more pleasure there's more of a capacity possibly for pleasure.
Absolutely. And it's so in meditation, it's called, and other forms of spirituality, it's called mindfulness. So mindfulness really is about being present to what you're experiencing in any given moment. Does not mean that it's not influenced by memory. It should be influenced by memory. That's the reason why we no longer stick a wet finger into a socket. That's the reason why we no longer touch a scalding hot pan without having an oven mitt on it. So without memory of things that were unpleasant, or again, things that were pleasant in our previous history, we wouldn't know what to attune to, move toward, and then we wouldn't know what to turn away from or move away from or discard as something that's neutral or below. I'm okay with neutral as long as we top it with more of the things that actually excite us and actually feel pleasurable for us. We can all be ho-hum. I mean, sometimes I'll do something that's ho-hum to please my partner. Sometimes I'll go out for that delicious steak meal that he finds so delicious. I would rather eat Thai food or more vegetables, but I'm a neutral to that, but I go along because the experience is shared and my husband gets so much pleasure out of a juicy, perfectly cooked steak. So I'm willing to make that compromise and that sacrifice. It's not really a sacrifice, but I'm willing to negotiate. Well, then maybe next time we go and it's a more of a vegetarian meal. I got to make sure there's a little bit of meat somewhere on that menu for him, or my husband will grumble. But that's like negotiating the space. We can't, if we sit on a crowded airplane next to someone who doesn't smell as delightful as we'd want them to, we can't make a big fuss out of it. But you just like, maybe you start to peel your orange, or maybe you suck on the lifesaver or the mint that brings you back to a place of pleasure. So we aren't always in control of our experiences, but we can focus more towards on something that we enjoy, which will distract us because we're mindful and attuning to this sensation. This one will become more and more quiet over time. We'll notice it less and less. So that's where sensations come in. We want to move towards those that are neutral and above for quite honestly, a way more balanced life.
Absolutely. I think I'm actually going to find this because it was so good in the book. And then I do have some questions about the book. Turning yourself, and this reminds me of the senses that we're talking about. Turning yourself on through sensual pleasure on a regular basis helps tamp down vigilance, leaving you feeling more at home in your body, improving your self-esteem, and helping you be more in tune with the flow of life. So these are big, big things that just being more attuned to your senses, your pleasure. Like, yes, this can definitely be in the sexual context, which we'll talk more about, but just overall in life, it gives you just a better experience of living all the way around, and gives you more, more confidence, more self-esteem. I mean, that's not bad. This
is about joy and happiness. And quite honestly, we wrote about it in the book. I think it's one of my sections, if not the introduction. It is a radical idea in this day and age that we do this. It is a radical act of self-love to reclaim your experience of pleasure, joy, happiness. And I'll tell you, pleasure is contagious. It's a tricky word to say. And the book was being edited and came out or went to publication during the time of COVID. But pleasure is contagious. Spread it. I mean, and we couldn't say that in the book because it was released during COVID. But the more joy you experience, it spreads into your relationships. It spreads throughout your family. I am not a mother. I never birthed my own children. But when I'm in a better mood, my husband's in a better mood. When I'm in a better mood and I'm visiting my nieces and nephews, we are laughing. Any one rotten mood can spoil the entire apple cart, and then one really good mood can uplift them all. And so really we're called selfish if we make time for this type of radical self-care. But I think it is a selfless act that then we are modeling, especially for the children that we're rearing. I mean, I don't even know, people who have dogs, if you're arguing with your partner, quite often that dog will start barking. The energy of the room, energy is contagious. And so when the whole room is calm, the dog will be snoring. But if there's agitation, that dog might start jumping and might start barking, because the dog senses that something is out of whack, out of balance. So again, I love the expression that this is a radical self-act of love. So I'd love to normalize that this is perfectly healthy and a perfectly normal expression to be happy and to experience joy.
Absolutely. And that it's okay to focus on pleasure. Like you said, it doesn't make you selfish. This is part of the healthy, holistic ecology of not only your own system, but the systems around you. And 100%.
Yep. And it can focus on sexual pleasure, but it doesn't have to. The word pleasure and the word arousal, they've both been hijacked, and everyone talk about hypervigilance. Then it's like sex. No. Sensuality and sensual pleasure 100% enhances your experience and whatever behaviors you're engaging in with regard to sex. But pleasure is simply laughing when your baby laughs or your baby crawls for the first time. That's pleasure. Pleasure is also learning a new language, learning how to cook this meal that you spent so much time, whatever pleasure means to you. But then when we cross over into sexual pleasure, if we bring all of the smells that we enjoy, all of the sounds we like to hear, and even the tastes, if our partner smells, we're actually attracted to people through the sense of smell. And because we all deodorize and do all those kinds of things, back in the day before we rinsed ourselves clean, the couples that were attracted to each other based on smell, they were more likely to mate and then birth healthy children than those whose smells offended one another. So we are animals. We are creatures of nature. And in 2023, we clean and we disinfect and we wax off everything. So like our natural smells are gone. But study after study, well, I shouldn't say study after study, there are multiple studies of divorced couples who if you ask them about when they started dating, they never actually liked how their partner smelled. Fascinating, isn't it?
That's crazy. And I have actually heard, and I don't remember where or when, but some research at some point was suggesting that with the smell and the pheromone, like that's actually the definition of love. Like we are animals of nature, and that quote unquote love is actually smell. Like they just kind of broke it down to which, who knows if that's actually true or not, but I just found that intensely fascinating.
Well, absolutely. If you think about, and even taste and as well as smell, if something is offensive to us, we don't move toward it. So just think of an animal in nature foraging, okay, for both taste and smell. They're not going to eat something that smells rotten. Good thing it's probably poisonous. So they're going to move away. It's actually going to repel them. If they bite into something and it tastes horrid, they're going to spit it out. More likely than not, that particular fruit or that particular thing that they bit into and tasted horrific. Now that's different from preferences. So, but there are certain things that we don't eat, and they are so bitter or so pungent with regard to the taste buds because they're actually poisonous to us. So why do we forget that we're walking around, we're human, we have thinking brains, we have choice here, but actually so do animals. Animals learn by repetitive behavior to move away from things that actually create disgust. Disgust is a safety net. It helps animals, of which we are, it helps us thrive and survive. Not just, I shouldn't say thrive, but it helps us survive poisonous smells. Since there are certain smells that now that are poisonous and toxic to us. And what they do is the chemical plants actually put an additive in there so that we smell it first. So we smell it and we're like, what's going on here? And we know danger. And some of those additives have been put into poisonous gas so that we can actually get out of the room, open, or call 911 because something doesn't smell right in the house. So we use this in other ways to protect ourselves, from danger. But then, now we can move into preferences because none of us are going to, by choice, eat spoiled meat. It's dangerous to us. So, you might some people don't like the smell of meat, and those people are more likely than not have turned vegetarian for their own, something about that repulses them. Maybe their bodies can't digest that. I don't know, but they've moved away because the smell of meat disgusts them. They don't, it's their choice. They don't eat meat. So it's a long way of kind of turning us back to the fact that we are, we're animals of the human species.
Absolutely. That reminds me of a quote that I just heard from Rick Rubin, who is the very famous music producer who has just written a fantastic book. And the quote is, "It's all lies. Back to nature, the only truth." Mm-hmm. Everything else is lies. Yeah. The only truth is nature. I believe that. Not everyone might agree, but that really, really rang true for me. I really do want to talk about pain and sexual pain. And firstly, what constitutes sexual pain? What does that look like? I know there's a broad range, but we can talk about that. And then this concept of using pleasure or being with pleasure to help heal sexual pain.
So very broadly, sexual pain is experienced uniquely in different people's bodies. But the book was written for those who unwantedly experience vulvar. So the vulva is everything outside, unwanted vulvar or vaginal pain. So the vagina, the opening of the vagina and all the way up and through the canal, that's the vagina. The everything outside that we can see. I mean, some of us can peer apart our lips and look inside the vagina, but unwanted vulvar or vaginal pain. And that's what the book was written for, those people who most often suffer that alone and in silence because they think something's wrong with them. Something is wrong, but they think something is psychologically wrong with them. They started to use tampons when their mother told them not to, or they started to explore their vulva and their clitoris, which is part of the vulva. They started to explore that in a very strict, let's just say, religious household. So they think that they've done something bad. They harbor a lot of shame, or they think they're broken. So most often they won't bring it up with their doctors. They won't bring it up with their therapist. And if they're seeing, let's just say, a pastoral counselor, they're not going to talk to their priest or religious counselor about sex because there's so many places where they were taught that sex is dirty. So the book was written and it describes vulvar, the diagnoses for vulvar and vaginal pain. But a lot of women, a lot of those in a female body who have a vulva, they don't like the shape, they don't like the size, and they don't like the smell. Perfectly healthy vulva, perfectly healthy, but there is emotional pain from the way that their vulva looks. So that's also in our description of pain. What emotional pain? Are you in a relationship that doesn't feel good? That also adds to the pain. But if we specifically stick to sexual, it's with regard to any one of the diagnoses of vulvar or vaginal pain. And my business partner she's 30 plus years as a pelvic floor physical therapist, working in the area of female or women's sexual health. Now, that was our population. There are other people who they have vulvas, but they don't identify as female or they don't identify as women. So I want to include them in here as well. But the book was written from the perspective of both of our practices, that we have both now closed our individual practices. So what I found is that when you know your anatomy and you are excited about your anatomy and you don't harbor any shame over your anatomy, that allows for you to experience more pleasure. So because of the way that I educate, I allow for more space to be filled by pleasure. And then with Dee, the other half of the book, she would be able to work as a physical therapist, hands-on, and actually either intravaginally or intraanally to release trigger points where tension and contraction were held. It's a muscle. The pelvic floor, it's superficial, and then there are 2 layers of muscle in the pelvic floor. So when that's contracted, things don't feel good down there. So she would work to decrease the pain. And I'm here to tell you that physical therapists, pelvic floor physical therapists, do an amazing job at ameliorating or decreasing a person's experience of pain. But what the studies have shown is those pain clients never get back to the healthy function of their non-pain peers with regard to enjoyment and with regard to frequency. So what's missing? They don't feel the pain anymore, but what's missing? They can't up level, or they don't get back to the level that the clients who've never had pain that they feel. So what's missing? We think it's pleasure. Because if I went to talk to, let's just pretend, I want to talk to you about running a marathon and you've just had your hip replaced. So you're heavily medicated. And I'm like, doesn't that sound like fun? Let's go, let's do that. And you're like, I'm in so much pain here. I can't even talk about pleasure. So you're just going to disregard me, ask me to come back after you've healed. But, because it does not sound pleasurable and it doesn't sound fun. Might not even want to hear about my experience. So that's what happens with the pain clients. You start to talk to them about pleasure, and that's the last place they want to go. So by introducing slowly the pleasure prescriptions, which is really learn about the anatomy of pain, where it comes from, so that you can be empowered to talk to your doctors about it. Learn about your anatomy, learn about what diagnoses really do constitute vulvar or vaginal pain. And then also at the same time as you learn about your anatomy, you learn about it from a functional, not just dysfunctional perspective. So how is it meant to function? Which includes arousal and feeling desire and feeling pleasure. And ultimately, if you so choose, experiencing deeper level of arousal so that you can experience climax if you want, or orgasm. So we very slowly introduce through the sections of the book a person so that they can become like their own advocate about what's going on in their body with regard to their pain, and then also with regard to reclaiming their pleasure. So we start out baby steps. We never introduce sexual pleasure until after someone has really been the sensual explorer, sensual adventurer, and they've journaled about what they like. I was about to pick up my journal about what they like. And please note what you don't like and then what's neutral, because then you can gravitate toward the colors and the sounds that bring you sensual pleasure, which then will just I chose this color today because I feel good in this color. And actually my bra matches too, because I thought it'd be really amp up the pleasure to have this conversation with you. So all of these things do have a role when we then want to cross over into sex, either by ourselves or with a partner, partners, whatever your configuration is. However you like to express yourself sexually really is only enhanced. The experience is only enhanced by the amount of pleasure, sensual pleasure, that you allow to flood and fill you with as you cross into the sexual domain of your choosing.
I found the book to be so well laid out and well written with fantastic case studies and stories from both you and Dee. And then each chapter has prescriptions at the end. And honestly, whether you're a person who's experienced sexual pain or not, there's so much value here just around basic education and anatomy and being okay with what you look like, feel like, smell like, that so many of us never really received. And so again, there's the first section of the book is more of like kind of what you were saying, stepping into these practices. And then the middle section of the book is more advanced practices. And then the last section is like with a partner. If I want to start, walking down the path of bringing this to a partner, what that would look like. And yeah, I really love how it's. So what would be a couple of the prescriptions that you have in the book that we could talk about right now, maybe one or two that someone can take away that would be relevant for anyone at any time, whether you're experiencing sexual pain or not?
Well, I think so there are a couple of things that have happened with regard to sex education and pleasure education. There really is no pleasure education. If we're taught in schools, if we receive sex education, there are at the time of publication, there were only 14 states, and things have changed because the environment, the government policies have changed dramatically since the book was written. But there were only 14 states that it was illegal to present misinformation with regards to sex and sexuality. Only 14 states required evidence-based, fact-based, truthful education around sex and sexuality. So when I was taught, it was don't look, don't touch, and most certainly don't enjoy. That is not, it was based on death and disease, pregnancy, death and disease because of AIDS, and then all of the different STIs. No one ever has a pleasure-based curriculum. So where do people turn to get sex education? Porn. There are more porn sites out there than there probably are, I don't know what else is prolific, but there are more porn sites for any kind of, and I'm fine using pornography as an enhancer or for entertainment or enjoyment purposes, but not as an educational tool. So I'm going back to that because of one of our exercises. We, in this day and age, here in the United States, there is a propensity for us to wax or shave and remove all very healthy, very natural body hair. So we are able to look at our vulvas, and we're exposed to the vulva way more than we ever were. Pornography, certainly in Australia, it is illegal to present the entire range of normal and healthy vulvar diversity. So that's just the vulva, because there are many different shapes, sizes, and colors, and we're all supposed to be asymmetrical. That's perfectly normal. Asymmetry is the norm throughout nature. Some of us may look a little bit more symmetric, but I imagine if we took out a little ruler, we would notice a slight difference either in thickness side by side with our labia. Okay, I digress. So what's happening is there are things that are out there, portrayals out there of vulvas that don't match the normal range. Back to Australia or New Zealand, it is illegal for you to show anything other than what looks like the stereotypic, culturized standard of neat and tidy. So if I've gotten all my education from porn and my labia, my vulva doesn't look like that, I'm going to think something is wrong. I have body hair. I have pubic hair, and everybody I've seen, maybe in my college dorm, story with that, but I'm not going to tell it. Maybe in, in the swimming locker room as a high school, nobody else looks like me. So what we actually ask our readers to do is make friends. Most of them are vulva owners, born with and identify as female women, but a reader with a vulva, any type of reader with a vulva who hasn't befriended their vulva, can start with simply clothed, is the easiest for many, many people. Just simply cup your vulva. Don't put any pressure, but just put your hands and just cup your vulva and breathe. Some of our hearts might be really racing. Some of our breath might be really short, but let that go. No pressure, just making friends with the vulva and just saying, hi, I'm here. You've been mistreated. You haven't felt so good on many occasions. I'm here. I'm here for you. I'm going to learn all I can so that we can be better together. You're not separate from me, and I'm not separate from you. It's a very, while it sounds very simple as I explain it, it's also very emotionally and psychologically complex. And we don't ask the reader to advance until they become comfortable with that exercise. And then I want you to notice, do you feel any sensation? Do you feel do you feel the heat? Do you feel if you have your clothes on, do you feel heat? Do you feel warmth? If you don't have your clothes on, what do you feel? Do you have pubic hair, or have you not been to the waxer lately and you feel kind of something scratchy against your palm? Simply notice. No judgment, simply notice. What can you feel between your fingers and your palm? Again, not moving it. I'm just simply cupping, not moving. What do you begin to notice? What do you begin to feel? And I ask people to make a journal, because sometimes this is like, I remember what my first boyfriend said about this. I remember what my mother said when I was, running naked through the house. What's attached to those messages so that we can start unpacking them? And then it progresses from there. Again, only when the reader is ready to advance do you get into a deeper practice of, I want you to take a look at your vulva. We first show them in diagrams the healthy range of normal vulvas. And I mean normal because that's just simply the norm. Yours is as different as the nose on my face to your face. My sisters, it's written in the book, night of our wedding, my husband and I wanted to know what my sisters looked like. We had the same mother, we had the same father, but we had all had enough cocktails to kind of relax ourselves. And they know I'm a little bit crazy. And we all took a look at each other's vulvas at the reception hall. We had a cell phone and we were looking, no pictures. We were looking at the diverse shapes and sizes amongst 3 out of the 4 of us. And we're sisters. We all were beautifully different and diverse in terms of colors, length, size, puffy labia, thin little labia, and it's all perfectly normal. So that's what we then take the reader through, showing them depictions, drawings of the diversity, and then we ask them to look for themselves and draw their vulvas. Make a collage of your vulva so that you feel really, really apart and not separate from this amazing area of our body that really is fraught with a lot of things, but it's just simply another organ system in our entire body. So they progress from there slowly and steadily. I think some people work toward the end, but they're like, wait, I'm ill-equipped to engage in this. And then they have to, we like to read the end of a book. Sometimes some of us like to eat dessert before we eat our entree. But I actually urge people to go all the way through step by step.
It's fantastic. And I love that you started with that practice because it is really profound. Like you said, it seems so simple, but just noticing if there is any discomfort, what stories come up that we have. Do you feel a sense of dissociation if you're cupping your own vulva and you're like, okay, I'm doing it, but are you present? Mm-hmm. Can you be in your body while you're doing that? Like all these different things, like you said, it's really psychologically and emotionally complex, even though the act itself is very simple. So highly recommend.
Yeah. And unfortunately for us, for so many people, but the sexual violence or the aggression or the abuse that has happened to us as sexual beings. So we don't negate that. That's why we start so slow. This is an area, our sex has created, so much, we tend to freeze if somebody has looked at us in an unwanted manner, or if we were told our skirts were too short, or pull that midriff down, wear a more sensible bra. All of those things will tend to shut us down. If we've ever had that unwanted touch, being grabbed or groped, all of those things are held. It's like we freeze. My legs just automatically just shut tight. It's a protective mechanism. So we start, and this is where a therapist can come in and be really helpful. Therapists are actually prescribing the book to their clients because they're using it as a step-by-step guide to walk with through their patients or clients to help them learn more about their bodies. And so that's fantastic for us because it was written for the end user. And now we have therapists, not only mental health therapists, but we have pelvic floor physical therapists using this as an adjunct and a support for the work that they're doing. But I cannot emphasize enough that if a person has experienced sexual abuse or trauma, there are many beautifully trained and very professional people to help you through that. We actually ask that a person not start this book and not start with the pleasure prescriptions until they've been working with a trauma therapist so that they can then have more room to experience pleasurable sensations and unwind and then get back into that window of tolerance so that their natural wave becomes more resonant with the baseline before any of the abuse or trauma happened. So that's one of the things that it's a great read, but moving forward in with some rather simple yet complex prescriptions, they can re-trigger a person. And that's the last thing that we want to do is ever add to anyone. If we push that person, we guide that person. The book is meant to, we're supposed to be there holding your hand. And if it's a guide for that person and we walk them toward an edge, that's fine. But the book is not meant to push anyone's edge, nor drop them over an edge to where they can't come back, because that's not pleasurable. And that is the antithesis of what this book is meant to do.
Exactly. If there is any trauma in someone's history, present or past, then obviously, absolutely seek outside help for that. And this book is not a replacement for therapy. It is like you said, it's a guide towards pleasure. Yeah. And so, thank you for making that distinction. Because this show is centered around people who identify as women in these middle stages of life, how is all of this might be a big question, but how is all of this magnified for us? This whole conversation around pain, pleasure, what comes up for you when I ask that question? How is all this magnified, amplified in this part of this chapter of life?
So I can answer this from a whole host of different, roots. Menopause.
Mhm.
The body changes with menopause. We lose estrogen. Estrogen is our friend. I am not a hormone specialist, but estrogen helps us stay nicely lubricated. Estrogen protects our hearts, our bones, our skin. And as we enter this phase of life, that naturally starts to decline. Many people have never experienced painful sex until menopause hurts. That's because the lining of the vaginal walls, we don't produce as much lubrication, and that naturally, the lining naturally starts to thin. So we just aren't as robust as we used to be. So pain can be introduced at that time. A lot of us at this stage, we have launched our babies. Our children have become, they've progressed into their adult years. They've moved out of the household, and we have all this space now and all this time to focus on ourselves. And we start to get that little itch, like, I think there's something more. What is it? So we want more. We can be loud and proud with our sexuality inside the privacy of our own homes, or maybe we want to be more risque in the outside world. But we're tuning back into ourselves and what makes us happy at this stage of our lives. Some of us are switching careers. So we could have gone from corporate to something that's more focused around wellness and well-being. It just becomes, as we step in, now I'm older than you, as we step more into our crone years, there's just a different hunger and a different urge and a different knowing that we can now pay attention to. So empty nesters, menopause, kind of like re-engaging with your partner for the first time, where the focus isn't your business or isn't your children. We love each other. We love each other dearly, but we haven't really touched except for on anniversaries, birthday, whatever religious holiday, and maybe Valentine's Day. So we're like, now we have all the time in the world. Some of us may never have experienced sleeping without clothing on. Some of us may never have experienced with walking in front of the mirror, walking in front of our partners naked. We've never looked at ourselves naked, but there's some kind of rumbling at this stage of our lives, perfect for the women of magic and mayhem, midlife. There should be madness in there too, because we have a right to go mad. We have a right to be madness, and also mad about certain things that were conscripted onto us. There's a madness. We get to shake all of that cultural conditioning off, because at this point in life, it's like, it's all about us and what we want to tune into or turn ourselves onto. And so, like, pleasure, we're thirsty, we're hungry for it. And pleasure is important at all phases of the natural life cycle. But I think we are at this age, we're ready to dismiss the cultural norms. We're ready to dismiss. Some of us have lost a parent or parents. And, while we didn't want to upset them, now we can really truly come out as to who we more naturally feel we are. So I think it's a perfect age to, like, be revolutionary, be that progressive, like, person who says, I am entitled to feel pleasure. That's sovereignty. Like, own it. Own everything about yourself. Own your sexiness, own your sensuality, own your boldness, own your voice. And that is all, like, that, that word of, like, embodied and sovereign, because we won't let anybody trespass our boundaries, either in a workplace or, no one will trespass our boundaries. The more empowered and, like, vibrant we are in everything that we've been talking about this last period of time we've been together.
Well, that is, it is the time. And I love what you were speaking to about owning all of it. owning everything, owning every part. And I think that all the work that you are doing and that Dee is doing and so many people in this domain are doing out there this is why it's so important. And for me, like even the development and cultivation of real wisdom, there's pleasure in that too. Like for me, there's got to be pleasure involved in the development of wisdom. Like, if I want to grow into an elder worthy of the next generation, if I want to grow into an elder who is considered to have wisdom, to be wise and not just be an old person, like we have old people out there. Where are the wise ones? So
with regard to that, how can you be a wise woman if sex, pleasure, and your body are hidden up in a tightly sealed box? We can't compartmentalize. The world has done enough to try and compartmentalize that on our behalf, and they're doing a really good job lately. So things are being banned, books are being banned. We are being blacklisted if we use words as pleasure, erotic, arousal off of Facebook, off of Instagram, owned by the same company, Twitter. Just using these simple words in a non-sexual manner, we're getting banned. So again, that radicalism that I'm talking about, our ownership and being able to share and spread that wisdom, I think that is our ultimate calling as women, as we step into this wise woman eldership role. Because the generations below us, they learn from us. They absorb it by being in and around us, but also through the way we write and the way that we speak. So I'm loving the phase that I'm in because I can be more bold. My mother knows about the book. My father, he knew I was writing it. He died before it was published, but they know what I do. I'm outing myself with regards to the words that I use on Facebook more and more, because the less and less I need other people's approval. And that's embodiment.
Brilliant. Well, again, I highly, highly recommend this book. If you've experienced sexual pain, if you are experiencing sexual pain, please start talking about it. Please start seeking help. This book is a great place to start, along with other therapies in your local area with human beings that can be touched by you. And if you haven't experienced pain, but you kind of don't know where to start exploring this thing called pleasure, and you're not maybe super comfortable with your body, or you are super comfortable and are looking for more information and education, any of those places that someone might be in, this book is fantastic for any of those. And I highly recommend it. And of course, I adore you and thank you so much for being on the show and for giving us your time.
It's a pleasure. It really is. I love talking about it. I love showing that two grown women can speak very comfortably and confidently about this without like, did she say the word climax on my show? Like you said, I could swear. No, I want to use climax. I want to use the word orgasm. I want to use the word clitoris. I want to, so all of that. I mean, the more normalized, it is a piece of your anatomy, no different than your pinky finger. It's our anatomy, for heaven's sakes. And if somebody tells you they don't know enough about it, please seek out other resources of those who will talk to you about it, because they are out there. They're willing and able to help. They're ready to help. So no, we're out boldly. You and I privately talk about sex. It's like, it's one of the things we talk about, as well as cooking, as well as skiing and, yes. Dogs. We're very well-rounded, the two of us, but start talking about it. Be that one, be the mama who talks to her age appropriate children. The younger folk think that it's normal that sex hurts. We've got to stop that. Sex is never supposed to hurt unless that's part of your consensual conversation with your partner. Sex should never hurt. Maybe you're not aroused enough. Maybe you're allergic to, maybe you're not using lubricant. Lubricant is your friend, no matter what age or stage of the life cycle you're in, because it's friction. Sex is about friction, and friction on a dry, two surfaces that are attempting to glide over one another. If you run naturally hot and you naturally are dry, lubricant, and make sure you use ones that go along with either the condoms you're using or the sex toys you're using. And then also with your body's pH. Some of them are listed in the book. They're great resources as to where you can find lube. Start talking to your college age children, younger. Rape is a huge issue on our college campuses. There's a section in the book about consent. Mm-hmm. Consent is a big word. Don't ever cross your boundary, and don't ever cross anyone else's boundary, and don't ever let anybody cross something that you have stated as yours. So it is like, this is a really, really important time sexually. And I think that if as parents or aunties, I'm an auntie, or godmothers, if we can start to have these conversations, they're going to run away from you, but just let them know you're here. And that is the little drop, the little seed that you plant. And then maybe 2 years later, maybe 3 years later, they're like, Aunt Lizzie, you wrote that book. I know you wrote the book. You asked me to get it on day one, and I've read it. And now I'm telling my friends, because we in this generation, her age, they think that sex, it's okay if sex hurts. So they'll come back if you appropriately seed them for these kinds of conversations, because they're all learning from porn, and porn is not an educator. So that's my last piece on that.
Well, thank you. It is a very, very important piece. And yes, the consent part of the book is so valuable for the 3-minute game from Betty Martin's work, and all of that is just, it's fantastic. Everyone should be practicing the 3-minute game, I think. Yeah. I don't care if you've been together for 30 years or 5 minutes. So yeah, there's so much value there. So thank you for writing the book. Thank you, Andy, for writing it, for doing all the research that you do and are doing. And I really, again, appreciate your time here being on the show.
Thank you. Again, it's the thing I do. It's the thing that brings me joy. I'm going to be up from this like the rest of the day. I have that kick in my step now. So I appreciate
That's all right.
it. Thank
Good.
you so much.
Well, thank you. I will see you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Elizabeth and I covered a lot of ground there, and I do highly recommend trying that simple practice that she outlined. Do it consistently for several days and notice what, if anything, changes for you. And let me know. I would love to know how this impacts you and your life and your pleasure. And please subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your shows. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to see these conversations, and share with your friends. And follow me, Angie Bird, on Instagram at angie.bird. This will help the show gain momentum and will help other women out there find us so they can create some magic and mayhem in their lives as well.